Hi, my name is Tom Antos and you're watching Adorama TV. So this is part 2 of a 3-part series about the making of a music video that I produced with the help of Adorama TV. If you guys haven't seen part 1, make sure you check that out. That's where I show you how I prepared and how I end up testing out different camera gear for this production. This video I'm going to show you how I actually end up shooting the video. So this video production, like many others, did not go all that smoothly. The first problem we had was with scheduling. We originally were planning to shoot this video at the end of August so we could get sort of a fun in the sun summer feel. Instead of that, we ended up shooting at the end of October. Another thing was the temperatures ended up dipping really low just a few days before we started filming, which got me worried just about how we were going to pull off those scenes on the beach. And then the final surprise was the really bad weather we got on the morning of the first day of the shoot. Now we were very limited with the time. We only had 2 days to film this because the lead singer, Anna Cyzon, she was only going to be in town for those 2 days and then she had to fly back to Canada. So because of that, despite of the bad weather, I knew that we had to end up just shooting something and sort of changing the treatment a little bit, changing the scenes and just kind of go with what we were able to get. Now, being an optimist, I ended up telling myself and my crew not to worry. I was thinking we'll probably end up getting just a little bit of drizzle in the morning, and by the afternoon it's all going to clear up and we're going to have the sun out and we'll be able to continue as scheduled. Well, that turned out to not be the case. Instead, as the day progressed, I think the weather got progressively much worse. The wind was picking up and just it seemed like more and more water was coming down. The rain was getting more intense, and then the wind along with that got so strong, especially towards the end of the day, that it was really hard to to film, and the umbrellas basically did nothing because the wind by the end of the day just ended up coming sideways at us. Fortunately, the crew that I had working with me on this video was really great, from the guys that came out to help out, to the makeup artist, Mia, to even the lead singer, Anna Cyzon. Everybody was in a very positive, very good mood. And nobody complained even once, even though we're all getting equally soaked and cold from the wind. But rather, as the day progressed, and as I said, the weather was getting worse, we ended up just sort of going with it and just getting really cool shots, and shots that really sort of portrayed New York in a different kind of light. And to my surprise, New York actually looks really beautiful in the rain, especially when you end up getting all those wet streets with the lights reflecting in them. Now, even though we were okay getting wet, I was still worried about the camera gear because, electronics and water usually don't mix very well. Now, because I got the camera sort of last minute before the shoot, I did not have time to check all the specs and all the, information about the camera, so I did not know whether it's weather sealed. Well, I can tell you guys that regardless of whether the camera is officially weather sealed or not, it actually performs amazingly well in water. And I say water because even though we just had sort of a rain at the beginning of the day, by the end of it, it was pouring buckets literally, and the camera was completely soaked just as we were, and I never had any problems with the camera, even with that lens. Now the lens for sure was not weather sealed because by the end of the day it had so much water and moisture built up in it that I had to end up actually using my hair dryer just to kind of get most of that moisture out of there. And it still performed amazingly well on the following day. And now the 3-axis gimbal that I used isn't weather sealed, but regardless, I had to take it out in the rain to get those shots. And I can honestly tell you guys that after a whole day of using this gimbal in the rain, it worked amazingly well. Never once did it stop, and I was able to continue using it the following day. Now on the second day, our bad luck actually ended up turning into really good luck, and that's because of the weather. And the second day, the weather actually sort of did a complete, 180 flip and went from this horrible stormy weather to almost summer-like weather. I mean, even though it was end of October, it did not feel like it. And so we started off actually, going to the original beach location that we're planning to shoot on. So I just ended up getting my underwear, and together with Anna, we ran straight into the ocean. And, despite the fact that there were people walking around on the beach wearing winter jackets, it actually wasn't that bad. The water was a little cold, but I think the sun and the really nice weather made up for it. And we were able to get all the shots that we were originally planning to get for the beach scene. So one sort of big piece of advice that I guess I can give you guys is to always stay positive. Doesn't matter what happens in your production, just when you think, it's the most horrible thing happened, it's going to ruin the whole film or project that you're working on, stay positive, try to sort of solve the problems right there on location as much as you can. Otherwise, just sort of move forward, keep on shooting as much as you can, because in the end, you never know what hand you're going to be dealt. I also end up getting a performance shot with Anna in this sort of a cool, funky hip-hop outfit in front of some really nice street art. This was graffiti that we found in Brooklyn. And then to finish off the day, we end up just going sort of all over New York City, getting some shots on the subway and also around Times Square. And now for this whole shoot, I end up using the 16 to 35mm f4 zoom lens from Sony. And the reason was because I relied very heavily on the autofocus system in the camera. And in order for that to work, you have to have a native lens, or at least for it to work really well. And I gotta say that this was the first professional project that I worked on where I've actually relied on autofocus. And I can't believe I'm saying that myself, because for years, people would ask me what kind of autofocus system I'm using, or how I'm getting the focus in my shots. And I always swore and told them, always you got to do it manually. There's no other way of doing it. Well, like I said, in this case, because I needed to have this small camera, on a small gimbal, I wasn't able to install a wireless follow focus system or have somebody even helping me pull the focus. So after shooting this video, I can honestly say that the autofocus in this camera works. It works about 90% of the time, as long as the camera can recognize the face. So there's a setting in the camera where you actually have to enable the face recognition. Once you do that, and once you have your person, your subject, more or less facing the camera, or it can be a little bit sideways, but just as long as the camera can see the face, will lock onto the face, and it does a really amazing job at keeping focus, even when the camera or the person is moving in or out really fast. Now, as far as the actual settings for the camera, most of the settings still were in manual. So really, all I ended up doing was setting my sort of exposure before each shot, adjusting my my shutter, my aperture. Now, for a lot of the shots where I didn't need that dramatic shallow depth of field, I kept the aperture really high, at like around f11, f16. Because this way it also meant that I had a really big depth of field, and it just also made it easier for the autofocus to work. So even at that 10% where the autofocus didn't do a good job, a lot of the times I still was able to get a usable shot. And now only when I was shooting at night in Times Square did I actually end up putting the ISO in automatic. And the reason was for that because we're running around, there was a lot of people, and many times we would kind of run into, under some little construction or, between people where it got really dark, and then suddenly we're out with, or the lights, the advertising around Times Square would change, and the intensity of the light really drastically changed from second to second. And there was just no way that I was able to pretty much, like I said, do a perfect setting and then run around with the gimbal and make sure that I get decent exposure. So I kind of had to rely on the camera in that sense. But again, the camera is a low light monster. It performs amazingly in low light situations. Not that Times Square really is a low light situation, but like I said, it can get dark, especially when you go into those kind of darker corners. So it was a good sort of test again for the camera, and again I was really happy with the end results, because like I said, most of the time the camera adjusted the ISO just perfectly to make sure that the shots were nicely balanced. One tip I'm going to give you guys is to not always rely and end up shooting in the S-Log profiles, whether it's S-Log 2 or S-Log 3. They're great flat profiles and they give you a lot of dynamic range, and they're great when you're using them, especially outside in the daylight, because that's when usually you have really wide dynamic range. But when you're shooting at night, even though, like I said, for example, like in these shots at Times Square, where it's not necessarily very dark, but it's still, there's a lot of dark corners in the shots. That's where I would recommend switching into another camera profile, like the Rec 709 or the Cine profiles. And the reason is because S-Log profiles do not perform very well in darker situations. Basically, the more shadows you have in your shots, the more grain and noise is going to be visible. It's still workable because this camera performs so well in low light, and the noise isn't overly noticeable. But still, if you want to just get a cleaner, better quality image, S-Log is actually not a good choice when you're shooting basically in a kind of a low-key setting. So I would reserve S-Log 2 or 3 for outside during the daylight, exterior shots. overall, I was able to get all the shots that I was originally planning to get in for the video, and a few extra cool shots in the rain that I didn't even think of originally. So really all that's left to do now is to edit the video together. If you're interested in finding out how I put together this whole music video, how I do the color correction and some cool in-camera tricks, then make sure you check out part 3 of the series. Also, while you're at it, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and check out Adorama Learning Center for tips and reviews of the latest camera gear. I'm Tom Antos, and I'll see you guys next time.
Do you want great-looking prints at low cost? Be sure to visit our easy-to-use online printing service. Adorama Pix has professionals who treat your images with the utmost care that you can count on. For a quick turnaround on photos, cards, or albums, use AdoramaPix.com.